Hey guys! So this video is going to cover my journey with my off-track thoroughbred Cheddar from his first rides with me to the 2022 Thoroughbred Makeover. I brought Cheddar home from new vocations on St. Patrick's Day in 2022, so that was around mid-March, and the Thoroughbred Makeover took place in October of that same year. So I had him for a little over 6 months when I got him to when I took him to compete in Kentucky. He was kind of an interesting horse because he was always so quiet and level-headed for almost every situation, but then he had a couple of really explosive moments either on the lunge or under saddle. So this would be Cheddar's very first ride in March 2022. I just hopped on when my trainer was over to see how he would be. He ended up being super quiet and easy, but I actually couldn't convince him to go forward. I always try to do my first rides without spurs or a whip, but Cheddar is really so lazy that I really couldn't get him going. I decided that I should spend a couple of days lunging him to get him a little bit more forward and understand my aids before I tried riding again. And he was really good for a walk-trot lunging. He kind of figured that out really quickly, but when we asked him to canter, he would just randomly hit the brakes, buck, or rear, or drag when you asked him to canter on the lunge line. But the funny thing about Cheddar is that he was actually always so quiet that I never really felt like I needed to lunge him to get the sillies out. And I decided to come back to lunging after the under saddle work was confirmed. A few weeks into owning Cheddar, I noticed that he had started to become a little back sore and sometimes sour in the ring, and he was having a really hard time picking up his right lead canter. I had my vet come out and they did a full exam on him. They found that he had negative palmar angles behind, and then he also had mild kissing spines, and they really suspected he also had ulcers because of the reactivity he had to being touched on his sides. Even though on the radiographs his kissing spines weren't really that severe, my vet was giving a guarded prognosis because of how cranky he was, but it was also really difficult to discern what was the ulcers and what was the kissing spines, and he was also lacking fitness because it had been quite a while since he had last trained for racing. We decided to treat the back pain with a butyl and Romaxin, and then try to work on building up some strength. Since he wouldn't lunge, but he was actually very good for me under saddle, I was able to work him long and low, and because the canter was uncomfortable for him, we just focused on walk trot and getting him stronger before we started attempting to canter again. So in addition to this rehab type work, I started introducing some trick training for Cheddar. I find that a lot of my horses just really enjoy this variation in work, and in addition to dressage at the Thoroughbred Makeover, I wanted to do either competitive trail or freestyle. So I worked on incorporating some behaviors that I thought would overlap well for both. In this case, I was training Cheddar to stand on the pedestal. In the middle of April, right before I moved from Connecticut to New Jersey, I decided to take Cheddar off property for the first time. This was partially out of necessity because Cheddar had pulled a shoe and I needed to get it tacked back on before I moved, but also it's important to get your horse off property when you're training for the Thoroughbred Makeover. For Cheddar, it was really anticlimactic. I kind of thought he would be pretty good, that's why I decided to bring him out and get his shoe put back on first. But because I was meeting the farrier, the timing was a little bit off, and I did have to go back home for work, so we kept the ride really short and we still only did some walk trot. A few days later it was time to move, so I put Cheddar on the trailer and we drove the 2 hours down to New Jersey. But once we got there, I had a tough time adjusting to the new location in the mud. My house in Connecticut was on top of a hill and had really rocky and sandy soil, and my place in New Jersey has like thick clay that doesn't drain well. So I wasn't really able to do any ridden work faster than a walk and definitely not faster than a trot. So we went back to doing a little bit of groundwork, and at this point we started really working on the side passing over ground poles and backing in a chute, standing on the pedestal, and just hacking around our property at the walk. Unfortunately, this was really not helpful for his rehab riding, so his training had taken a bit of a backslide at this point. When it got dry enough for me to start riding out in the fields again, some of Cheddar's old demons did return. I did have my new vet out to look at Cheddar one last time, and he felt pretty good actually about how Cheddar was looking. He wasn't terribly worried about the radiographs, and he thought Cheddar just needed to get to work more. So I kept working him, and at the beginning of June, I decided to take Cheddar to his first show. I still didn't feel comfortable cantering him at a show at this point, especially his right lead canter was super unreliable. So I just did intro A and intro B, And Cheddar did a really great job in the warm-up of his first show, and he didn't get to go and do any ring familiarization before his first ride, and it was a schooling show, so even though the judges were really nice and were like, do you need time to settle down your horse? I panicked and I was like, nah, I'm good and I'm gonna go. So he actually did pretty well, but if you notice that he looks more tense in the ring than he did in the warm-up, it's because he was more tense in the ring than he was in the warm-up. So in June, I was going on vacation, and actually right before I went, Cheddar really started getting the hang of the right lead canter, and instead of leaving him at home to sit for the week, I actually decided to take him and Moose up to my trainer in Connecticut before I went on vacation. As Cheddar got stronger, he got more comfortable in his body, and I decided to take him to his first recognized show. I signed up before I went on vacation, and I entered him in Intro B and Training 1, just kind of hoping that his right lead canter would be figured out by then, and if it wasn't, I figured I would just scratch. I took one last lesson with my trainer in Connecticut before I picked him up and brought him back down for the show in New Jersey. The last 2 days leading up to the show, I really was starting to think that maybe I should scratch, just because Cheddar didn't seem quite ready to go in the ring and pick up the right lead canter, but I figured whatever, it's all a training opportunity. So I ended up bringing him over, and even though I went off course in Training 1, he scored a 69, which would have been a 70 had I stayed on course, and he scored over 70% in Intro B. So actually it was a pretty good outing. Because of where I went off course, I actually had to pick up the right lead canter twice in Training 1. It was really good to confirm that he had in fact mastered the right lead canter enough that he could pick it up not once but twice in the show ring. I felt like that show was a real turning point in Cheddar's training. Not long after that, he was cantering on the right lead just as easily as his left. And actually, once I got him cantering willingly, I realized it was a really beautiful and uphill canter, and it was really nice to ride. It really helped to be able to take Cheddar out in my big back open fields and really let him open up his stride. And on the days when it was too hot to ride, I did some trick training with him, working on the Spanish walk and standing on the pedestal. I was pretty certain at this point that I wanted to do freestyle with him, and I had envisioned that he would be doing Spanish walk, pedestal work, and maybe some line dancing. In early August, I actually did another recognized show with him, but this time I was there completely by myself with no one to help me on the ground and no one to film, so there's no video evidence of it, but he did really well. Both of those were local one-day shows, and I wanted to bring Cheddar off property to an overnight show, so I decided to bring him to HITS, which is one of the biggest horse show atmospheres you can find in my area. And of course, because he's Cheddar and he's so level-headed, he took it all in stride, no problem. I was a little frustrated with our weekend at HITS just because we rode with the same judge almost every single time, and I wasn't really getting any new feedback, and also that judge didn't really like Cheddar very much, so it was really not my favorite show, but it was good to confirm that Cheddar could go, stay in a stall, and do a weekend away at a horse show without a problem. After we got back from HITS, I gave Cheddar a little vacation, but when I went to put him back to work, he had bruised the sole of his left front hoof, and so I had to give him some more time off. We had a drought, so the ground was really hard, so he might have just, stomped at a bug and bruised it that way, but we'd also been practicing the Spanish walk, and I was worried that him striking out with his front feet like that could have been what bruised his foot, so I decided to take a break from the Spanish walk and not incorporate it into our freestyle routine. Even though my routine wasn't really finalized yet, I did know that if I was cutting out the Spanish walk, I probably needed to add something else to make it a little bit more interesting. Cheddar's a really talented horse, so I didn't want to just go in and canter around and show his dressage training. I kind of wanted to highlight how smart and how bomb-proof he was. By the time he bruised his foot and I decided to cut the Spanish walk, we had less than a month to go to the makeover. I was trying to think of something that I could add back into the routine that wouldn't require ground people to help me set up my props, and something that Cheddar could hopefully pick up quickly because we were really working on a limited time. A few weeks prior to the makeover, I decided to see what he would think of a flag, and in true Cheddar fashion, he just didn't care at all. So I went ahead and designed a flag with his face on it and ordered that on Etsy. I didn't read the sizing very carefully, so I actually ordered a flag that was twice as big as the one that I had been practicing with. But fortunately and very thankfully, Cheddar didn't seem to mind the bigger flag dragging against him or making louder flapping noises. He adjusted to it really quickly. So this next clip is my dress rehearsal with Cheddar. This was my first time ever trying to ride through my entire freestyle routine to the music. We'd had a big storm that just came through and my fields were really wet, and it was really hard for Cheddar to hold the canter here, and I just couldn't get the simple changes. So I tried a couple of times and we were never successful. And I figured, well, hopefully the footing will be better in the covered arena at the makeover, and if not, we're just doing this for fun. I also really struggled to figure out how to hold my flag. My original plan was to carry a dressage whip and use the whip to fly my flag like a flagpole, but when my new flag came in, it was way too big for that, so I really struggled to hold it in a way that you could actually see Cheddar's face on it, and I didn't even get that right until we were in the finale. I did my dress rehearsal the day before we left for Kentucky, so after this, we pretty much just packed up and hit the road. Once we got to the makeover, Cheddar unsurprisingly handled the atmosphere really well. He schooled really well in the warm-up arenas and did ring familiarization in both the dressage arenas as well as the covered arena for freestyle. The covered was super busy, and it was after he'd already done his dressage schooling, so I kept it really short, but we did practice one simple change, which he did with no problem. Both dressage and freestyle actually went really well for him. Cheddar finished 11th out of over 100 horses for dressage, and he finished 2nd overall in freestyle. Cheddar got a lot of kind comments from the judges and our fellow competitors on his demeanor and how beautiful his movement was, and especially the canter, which felt good to me considering I knew that he couldn't even canter when I first got him a little over 6 months before. Cheddar might not have been the right horse for everyone because he did require some rehab at the beginning of his training, and he did have the occasional naughty behavior that stemmed from the pain in his back and from his ulcers. But I also think a lot of people would have overlooked a horse like this who was really special and had a wonderful brain, and so I'm really glad that I ended up with him. When you work with the same horse every day, it's really easy to miss how much they evolve, but it's pretty impressive where Cheddar started and where he finished up. I plan to continue competing with Cheddar in dressage and hopefully moving up the levels with him. So if you're still here, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in following along more with Cheddar or any of my other retired racehorses, please subscribe to my channel.